Yeah, so just, I guess, start now.
Yeah, it's on.
Let me see. Uh, so now, realizing. Just a minute. Okay. So I want to basically the project you're going to use. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Um, Basically, what you're going to do, I'm going to be using VS Code throughout these this talk. I prefer VS Code because it's got a lot of built-in features that we could use for our coding. So I'm going to be using VS Code. I'm going to create we're going to create a simple application, and it will use. Okay, before we go into that, for those who don't know me, my name is Mauko Maunde. I'm um, I'm a full stack developer. I started coding in 2012, and at the time I wasn't really coding because we were doing some poetry shows, and then the organizers, we decided to start a digital agency. And then at the time I used to write. So these guys decided, okay, you could come in and edit our copy content for our clients. So I did that for a few months, and then I had to start because I was working on websites. So I had to start working on the designs for those websites. And then after, so I started editing simple HTML, changing colors, adding text, that kind of thing. And then eventually I had to, because we were running mostly WordPress websites. So I had to learn PHP because WordPress is built on PHP. And I had to learn PHP because I had to edit themes, theme functionality. So from there, I used W3 schools to learn PHP. And after a while, started developing, editing WordPress themes. Then I started developing my own. And then after a while, I started working on plugins as well. Um, I think what I'm most known for is M-Pesa because I've been involved with the M-Pesa project for a while. And I did work on an M-Pesa plugin for WordPress that is pretty currently the most used plugin for integrating M-Pesa. So around 2016, 2016 before I moved to Nairobi, because I used to stay in Mombasa, late 2016, 2016 or 2015, I was working with a hub in Mombasa called Swahili Pot. And at the time, we were developing a mobile app for the hub and the website. The website, we built it with WordPress. The mobile app, we wrote it with Java. It was an Android application. But we needed the two to share a database. So we needed the app and the website to be in sync. So at the time, because our website was built with WordPress, we tried using the WordPress API, and it was awful because the WordPress API you get a lot of unnecessary data when you make API requests. So at the time, I thought, you know what, because I've become proficient enough with PHP, we can develop our own framework. Like instead of using WordPress, we can develop our own framework, and then we'll create our own API, and then we'll use that API for the mobile app. So I set about creating my framework. I called it Jabali. The code is on GitHub. I called it Jabali. So I built in all these features because I had basically the way I had learned WordPress, I basically took it apart, figured how it worked. So I built my own framework and built in features like code editing using Code Mirror. So I made a framework that could be editable from within. And then sometime later, after I had moved to Nairobi and I got my first job and our first project, we were supposed to use Laravel, and I had no idea how Laravel works. But I learned fast. I'm a fast learner. So I checked out Laravel and really loved it. Then I realized that whatever I was doing with my framework, Laravel had already implemented it. So I was like, there's really no need to develop a new framework. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And that's basically been my motto since. I love Laravel. I love the fact that as much as Taylor, the founder, says it's opinionated, to some level it's not. It still allows you to create code the way you want. But I also love Laravel because most of I don't code much on Laravel, because with Laravel, most of the stuff you can do it in the terminal, creating models, creating controllers, seeding the database. With Laravel, it's like 65% code, 45% bash. And in a way, I like it because it's easier to, it's very easy to give a proof of concept. If a client comes to you and says, okay, I want an app that does X and Y, with using Laravel, it's way too easy to create something within an hour and say, okay, is this the kind of functionality you want? And then before you start development. So for this particular talk we're going to go through, I'm going to create, let me ask, how many of you here are Marvel fanboys?
Are you about to start a move?
Yeah?
We are Marvel fans.
Yeah, so I'm a huge Marvel fan. So what you're going to do as we learn Vue3, basically we're going to be building an app for Nick Fury to manage the Avengers. Say the Avengers need a portal where they can log in and do their stuff. So we're going to be building a portal for Nick Fury, for the Avengers to use. Our portal, we're going to build, the front end we're building it with Vue, of course, because we're learning Vue, but the backend, it's going to use a backend API that I just put together something quickly to use for our records. So our app is going to have a listing of Avengers and their powers. So at this point, we basically have two types of content. We have the users who are the Avengers, and then we have their powers. So here, if you see my screen, this is the Laravel backend. It's just a simple, if you look at the routes, it's a very simple one. We have controllers, we have users and powers. The users will be our Avengers, so we'll be creating them. For those who understand Laravel, this is a very basic setup. There's nothing much there. This is a resource controller. The index method will return all of our Avengers, but it also allows us to search through them, like search by name or something. And it's paginated because we need that. This method stores our information from an API request. It will store our data when you're creating a new Avenger or creating a power. This show, it just returns a single record, a single Avenger or something. Update, of course, it updates the Avenger's details. Destroy, deletes the Avenger. Same thing with the power. Basically, we'll be saving their powers and that. So it's a very simple setup for the API backend. It's very simple. So my projects are built. I'm going to use the Vue CLI to create my project, to create this project. At the end of the talk, I'll make it available on GitHub, so you'll be able to view it. So creating a Vue3 project is quite simple. We're just going to, let me enlarge this. You'll type Vue, we'll create a project. My projects are organized into folders. So we create a new project and say we're going to call this project Avengers. Yeah. And then the Vue CLI allows you to select, you can decide to select. I have a few defaults, but we're going to manually select the features we want to use for this project. So we're going to, we'll choose a Vue version to use. We're going to use TypeScript. It will be a progressive web application. It will have routing, and then I'm not sure if we really need Vuex, but we can have it there. So we'll choose Vue3. I don't like using class style components. Yes, we can use Babel, and yes, yes, lint with prettier, lint on save, dedicated config file. So you can set whichever configuration you want. So we're going to go with those ones now. So wait for the project to install. So for Vue, personally, the reason I love Vue, I've talked about why I love Laravel, but the reason I love Vue, there are so many stories about PHP being outdated and everyone moving towards Python and JavaScript, and people tell you tell people you code in PHP, they just laugh at you and they're like, how, why? I tell them, but it pays my rent. So it pays rent. It's not like I'm doing kazi ya kanisa. So I love Vue because was it Chris or there? Someone else said, Vue has a very smooth learning curve. Like, it's so easy to understand. It's very easy to understand. The documentation is straightforward. And I think coming from a jQuery background, I love just how reactive Vue is. And I think for me, that reactivity is what attracted me to Vue. Because coming from a PHP or rather a WordPress, Laravel, PHP background, before Vue, and I think even before React, we were just using jQuery because you're thinking, especially if you entered Ajax, you wanted to be able to render information without reloading data. Most of us used jQuery, and jQuery is nice. It's nice. It's helped us know a lot. But as far as reactivity is concerned, Vue.js works. I find it to be top-notch. As for React, I know people would argue for React and all that. I've never used React. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook products in any way. I don't. So I just basically, I refused to use React. But Vue, I love that Vue, it's not particularly opinionated, because it's got a framework of how you can do things, but it still allows you to do your own thing. That's the beauty of it, because it's just basic JavaScript. It might look complicated, but that's like, they're just rules or guidelines on how things are supposed to be structured, but it still allows you to do your own thing. So this is taking longer than expected. It's installing. Personally, I use Yarn for package management over NPM. It's a personal preference anyway. So I'm going to open the newly created project. So the beauty of using Vue CLI is that it does most of the scaffolding for you. So it's basically built as we have like a basic a skeleton of our app, of our application. We've got the main file here because I chose to use router and Vuex. So those ones have been imported automatically for us. We have a root component for our app. And then we've got a folder for views, for Vuex. We've got the store there. We've got our routes defined here. And then our components here. So this is a basic, it's just a basic setup for Vue. And then of course our node module. So the first few things I'm going to do before I proceed is I'm going to change the ESLint rules because we're using a Laravel API backend, and Laravel uses is it called snake case instead of camel case for the variables, and it might give us problems. So I'm going to go to remove those rules. Just a minute. I'm fetching something, then I share. So I want to remove the rules so that it allows us to use non-camel case for our variables. Just a minute. So it's quite, there's just a few rules that we'll need to remove this. So we'll add our rules here in this file. The others are necessary, but basically I'm turning camel case off so that it allows us to use snake case for our API requests. So what I'm going to do, let me serve this project so you can see. Part of the other reason I love using VS Code is this terminal, the built-in terminal. I can do everything I want here. So if you're using a different, the other terminal, basically you CD into the project. So if I open the terminal here, it's opened this project here. This is basically we're basically just in the project. It has navigated into the project, so the terminal is opened in the project. So I'm going to serve the project so we can view it in the browser. It's building. Let me get the browser. I'm opening the browser. So you can see my browser. Just a minute. Sorry, I'm not using. So I was saying I had a few products and my product manager is here. And, well, I use WhatsApp as well. I'm not, I just said I'm not exactly a fan, but yes, I use WhatsApp. So it's, anyway. So I'm going to the project in the browser. So when you create an app with the Vue CLI, it will give you, this is a very simple layout. There's nothing much here. It's a simple, just a template. So we're going to remove the things we don't need here. We're going to remove the things we don't need here. We're going to remove the things we don't need here in this file. So like I said, our app is basically, it's going to create, we're going to be able to create, to save records for our vendors, and then delete records and that kind of thing. So I want to use Bootstrap for styling. So I'm going to install, I can remove all of these. I can remove this styling because we're going to be using Bootstrap. So what we'll do, I'm going to use Bootstrap for styling, and I'm going to use Axios for the HTTP requests. So we'll go ahead and add our packages, Axios, Bootstrap. And then the other thing we'll do is we can edit, we can remove the other things we do not need. Like the hello component here isn't needed. We'll create our own. We'll create our own components to use. So actually, we could just remove all of these now. I can recreate it. So I'm using Yansav. So this project reloads automatically. Just a minute. I have to keep switching between windows, so the sharing stops. If I switch to the browser. Okay, so we've got our Bootstrap installed and Axios installed as well. What I'm going to do now is I forgot to install Vue Axios. Vue Axios allows us to, like, it's a better integration with the Axios in Vue. So as wait for it to start. One of the main things I love about Vue3 is something called the composition API, which is what we're going to use. Basically, the composition API allows us to decouple a lot of apps functionality and make it available for reuse. So you could have, I know someone mentioned that they used to do that before, but at least now it's built in. You've got, you can build your modules or services and have them in a single folder, and you can reuse them in your, you can reuse them inside your components. So we're going to build a few modules here. I'm going to call them services. So I will create, we can create we can create a directory here and call it services. You can name these whatever you want. You can name it anything you want. There was someone in the group who had questions about how to use Axios. I hope he's here. So we can, this one will help. So I'm going to create a simple service for, let me just use cd. Then we're going to create a simple HTTP service. I'm using TypeScript, so I'm going to be writing everything in TypeScript. So we're going to build here, this one we're going to use to create a simple service for our HTTP requests, for post, get, and all those requests. So this one basically uses Axios. Just a minute. Yeah, so we're going to import Axios. I don't know why my laptop is incredibly slow today. So we're going to import Axios, and then we'll create a new instance. Say HTTP is equals to Axios create. And then so one of the things with Vue3, this one, if you want, you don't need to install an env module for you to access environment files. So let's say we want to have an env file for configuration data. So and say we want, because you're making HTTP requests, we want our Axios instance to use our configured environment data. So we'll just do env. So for Vue3, if you're going to create records, if you're going to have your configuration in the env file, they have to start with Vue_app. Otherwise, they won't be automatically set. So what we'll do, we'll go back and we'll create our file. We'll create our env file. The env file has to be in the root directory. It has to be in the root directory here. So you can configure anything you want in the env file. So in our case, we'll set our API. In the case here, I'm calling it Avengers.test. So you can use whatever configuration you want there, and then say we have a name for our app, and saying it's Avengers. So what we'll do here, because we're going to be importing a lot more other components, I'm going to separate these and say cost app is equals to that, and then we'll duplicate these. I know you can chain you can chain these use statements, but personally I prefer having them separate like that, so that the code is more readable and you can understand, someone maintaining it understands it better. So I think for those coming from Vue 2, I think you notice there's a huge difference here from how Vue 2 used to work when you are creating an instance, a Vue instance here. So instead of doing a new Vue, here we're using the create app method from Vue. We're importing the create app method from Vue, and then we're using it to instantiate our Vue instance. Then, of course, we're importing the root component, which is this app file, and then we're using that as our base component. And of course, you can import any other modules you want. Like here, we've imported our router, and we've used it here. We've imported the store, and we've used it there. So I'm going to import, instead of importing something I forgot to do here. So if you create your modules, don't forget to export them. Otherwise, they won't be available for you to use. So here, I'm going to export this instance. HTTP, in this case, it's an instance. It's an Axios instance. So we'll come back here. We'll import, remember we installed Vue Axios because we're going to be using that to integrate Vue. So we're going to import Axios from yeah. And then we're going to basically we'll use it. We'll set it here. So app use what this one does, if we use Vue Axios, it will actually avail the Axios instance globally. So we'll be able to use it globally in our components if we have it here. So basically, Vue Axios takes the first, when you're using it, it needs the configuration or the options. And the options here, we're going to be using them. We're going to use our Axios instance that we created. So we created it under services, HTTP. So we're going to use that as our options for our Vue Axios. Then the other thing you need to know about Vue 3 here, I know in the past you'd use Vue, if you wanted to register a global component, you'd use Vue component and then you define the component. So let's say we had a component for pagination, and let's call this component pagination. Let's say we had that component and we wanted it to be global. So it's a basic It's a basic template. Can deal with it. We can add pages later. So let's say we have this component called pagination, and we want it to be global so that you can reuse it in other components. So what we'll do to register it, to register the component, we'll just we'll import it. Import our pagination component. From our components. So to register this component, the import, it's not basically we're going to use our Vue instance here, our app instance to register. So we'll say app component. Sorry, I think my is a bit slow. Okay, so we're going to register component. We're going to register our component, and you can use any name you want. We'll use an identifier, the component name, and we can call, let's say we can call it pagenet. Instead of whatever name, you can have whatever name you want to use for that particular pagenet, and then our component plotted up here. So if you're wondering why they have not, I usually just write the code through, and then once I've finished typing out whatever I want, I simply just format it, and then it's formatted automatically, closing whatever everything else is added. So this is our point of entry. This is our main file that is going to register for our project. We've imported our plugins that we needed to use. We've imported components that we need. We've created an instance of our Vue app, and then we've registered all the modules or the plugins and the components we need, and then we've mounted these. So these basically the app mount. I think for those who are not aware, basically we're telling Vue that we are going to use an element called app, an element with the ID of app. If you go to our index.html file, you'll notice there's this here, this element called app. That's the element we'll mount our app on. So if we, just a minute, need to, I don't know how I can share more than one screen to go.
Are you talking about sharing a screen, multiple desktop screens?
Sorry?
What do you mean by sharing multiple screens?
No, it's fine. It's okay. I think it's okay. It's okay. You can see it's fine. So basically, we've got our code here, and this is what we have at the moment. So there isn't much to it. So what I'll do, we're going to have 3 pages basically. We'll have a home page, which is our landing page, and then we'll have a page where you can add the Avengers, and then there's another page where you can add powers. So the page for Avengers, it will list Avengers, and then it will have a form for you to create a new Avenger. So let me see if I can get a simple, or rather, let's just use these. So I want to copy this logo and to use it on our hub. I just need to copy the link. So what you're going to do for our homepage, I want to change this thing so that here, instead of, I want to replace this Vue logo and with, I don't want to download the images. So, because sometimes you could be using, what do you call them? You could be using, what do you call them? You could be using a CDN to load your images. So, basically, I'm pretty sure it's not reloading. Anyway, so let's say we imported Bootstrap. I forgot to load Bootstrap. So in our main file, we want to use Bootstrap functionality. So we installed Bootstrap. I'm going to import Bootstrap. Yeah. And then we're going to use, we are basically going to use it. We'll add it here. Let's say app.use Bootstrap. So this one will allow us to use most of the JavaScript functionalities for Bootstrap, but I also want to use the Bootstrap styling. So I'm going to import the CSS for Bootstrap. It's basically Bootstrap sorry, we don't need these. We don't need these. We don't need to use the plugin. It's available. So if we import Bootstrap, either we import the CSS, it is available for you. It's availed automatically. So we'll be able to use it. So if you So I think maybe I could set loading. So it needs jQuery. Let's just add the dependencies. Coming soon. Luckily, Bootstrap 5 drops this need for jQuery. You won't need jQuery if you're using Bootstrap 5. So here we're just going to add it as a dependency. I'm not really going to use it, but we're just going to add it as a dependency jQuery. So meantime, we can edit. So because I'm going to be using Bootstrap, we can format our app any way we want. So we're going to be modifying these. We're going to be modifying this main app so that it uses Bootstrap styling. So what I'm going to do, I want us to get to. I just want to copy. I want to copy the components, Bootstrap components that we have here, instead of. So there's some I can write off the top of my head, but others that I can't to. To start, I want us to start with a very simple layout with like a navigation bar, then the the content. So I want trying to get these. It's taking too long to load. Or I could actually just write them out instead of copy pasting. I can write them out without a problem. So it's still installing jQuery. So what we're going to do, because we're using Bootstrap now, so I'm going to rewrite all of these. So I'm going to remove everything that we have, and then we'll go through how you create the new way, how we can create a component in Vue. So this is a simple component. Of course, we've got the template. And then our component, it's a simple, let's say our app is contained in a simple. Let's just call it, let's call it a container. Because these are Bootstrap classes. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Bootstrap. So we're going to start with, like it's just a normal setup. We'll have a header. Then we can have our main, our footer. So basically, our header here will have the menu, and then this menu, because we're using Bootstrap, it's we can add basic Bootstrap classes, and then we can have our this one will be basically have maybe our logo, but we can in there we want. So And then, of course, the other things you can add. You can add more content here and say the button that toggles the navigation. Then, so the way, just a minute. I wish I could just copy these things, but so most of the time you use existing templates to write this thing. So I want us to add a menu, and then we can proceed. Our toggler, toggle collapse, and then it's data target. So this, the styling, this is just bootstrap. ID is equals to, and then, sorry, we can do data target is equals to navigation. So this is a simple toggle button, and then we can create its target and say so I want because we need class number. Sorry. This is a collapse. Collapse, they help with like the initially hidden, so you can have a collapse, and then we set our ID to now. This is we have a simple. We need to have a list of our. This is just it's a simple menu. Class nav. So you can have our list items for each of the menus, and then so in most cases, some of this code is dynamic. I'm guessing you'll be either fetching them from somewhere that they can be dynamic. So our first menu, it's we're going to use the router link. For those who don't know, the router link is basically an anchor component. It's like the anchor, normal anchor component, but this one, it's built, it's inbuilt for Vue. It allows you to, it basically, when you click on it, it makes a new request without necessarily reloading the page. If you use a normal anchor link, like we did here, it would navigate to the new page. But if you use the router link, we don't have to. We do not have to, it doesn't have to reload the page. So our first menu is for the home page, and I'm going to call it home. So I can copy these. Our second menu will be basically show the Avengers. And then finally, last menu will be for powers. It will be listing powers. So we can do the powers. So this is going to be our, it's our simple layout for the menu, and then so the reason I've put these in the app main app component is that, of course, whichever page we navigate to, we're going to have the menu to show, and then we'll need we can have our router view here. So for those who don't know, the router view, it's a view component, it's a view router component that loads our data. Like if you navigate to a new route, the data will be rendered inside our router view. Then of course we can have whatever doesn't need to be much here. You can just say so this is going to be our simple, like just a simple app. It will render apologies. Yeah, okay. What we'll do, because of the bootstrap errors, we don't need the bootstrap, most of the JavaScript functionality for now. So what I'll do, I'm going to disable the functionality here for now. But if you want Popper.js, like for things like drop-down menus and such, you'll need to include that. Or let me just add it, because why not? Popper.js. And then we can. So while it installs and it builds, we've created our where is it? We've created our main file with our routes, and we have these 3 routes, but we haven't defined these routes. So if you go to our router file and we define your routes in ways. We import our component here at the top, and then we have it on our route, or we can lazy load them. So what I'm going to do, what I normally do, I usually the home and any other base component, like if you have, sometimes you need an empty component to use for whatever. So for those, I import them the way home has been imported. But for the other routes, I prefer lazy loading them. Lazy loading them, it has a bit of performance increase and improvement, because basically everything, your routes are chunked, and then it makes for an easier, how do I put it? Well, the point is the benefits to lazy loading, yeah, because at least when someone navigates your page, it's not the whole script is not imported at once. Only that which is required is imported. So in our app here, we define 2 routes. There are 3 routes. We've got the home, we've got for the team, and then we've got powers. So we're going to define these routes. So home is already defined, and then the next one, we're going to define our team, our route for the team, and then we can name it whatever we want, and say the team, for instance, and then we're going to create a view that will render our team. This view team that we, and then the other route is for for their powers. So you can have as many routes as you want here. You can actually powers. So here we will create a simple. We'll create another view. This routing, if for projects that have like if you have submenus maybe or something, or you want to have other parts after powers, like say you want to be able to view a single power, or in this case for our Avengers, if you want to view a single Avenger, we can add child routes under that, and you can have as many children as you want. So let's say we wanted, if you navigated to /team with an ID of our Avenger, we could actually just have it. We could say, now you need to note that for children, if they are under the main parent, we don't need the /. So in this case, we can just say ID if you're navigating to a single Avenger. So you can go, you can change the name to Avenger, and then we can have a view, a single view for the Avenger. So let's go and create our views. We have 3 of them. I prefer creating everything, like creating files and stuff. I prefer doing that using on the terminal. So we've referenced 3 files here that we need to create. So we are going to create, first we'll create the team component. Wait, sorry. We are supposed to be doing, it's in views, not components. So we'll create our component for the team. We'll create another view for and then we'll and then finally we'll create the one for Avenger. So let me reload so that we can see what we have so far. You'll pardon my memory is off. Yes, for Philip, because I'm using Bootstrap, you can actually add your own. You can add your own CSS or whatever in the index.html. For Vue, if you're using Axios in Vue, yes, we would need Vue Axios because Vue Axios enables us to have them like globally. It's not necessary, actually. The Vue Axios, it's not necessary, but it's a nice wrapper around Vue, around Axios that enables us to use Axios in the project. So Vue Axios, it's not particularly necessary, but you might need it. I would recommend using it. For CSS, in this case, if you wanted to, you can do normal imports. You can have in your index where is it? Here. In your index.html, you can actually import your normal, you can add a CSS file here if you want. You can do link, href, you can add your CSS file here if you have external ones. Either that, or if you're going to use preprocessors, then you can have it, you can have them here. You can create a file. So if you want to use preprocessors, or even you have custom style sheets that you want to import, if you don't want to do scoped files, you can actually have them in your assets folder and then just import them in the main file. So cd assets. So let's say we want to have, in this case, we'll do normal CSS. We're not using preprocessors because I haven't installed a preprocessor. But if you can, let's say we have a file called styles.css. So what you do, once you've got your file, this file could be either styles.css, or if you're using a preprocessor, it could be a SAS file. So it could be SCSS or whatever you want, or less, can be whatever you want to, whichever you want to use. So in this file, you can import other files you need here, or you can actually define your own. You can define your own styles. You can define whatever you want here in this file, say so you can define everything you want here, or you can import other styles. Like if you installed Tailwind, for instance, using yarn, you can reference it here. You can reference it in this file, and then we'll import it in our main file. So we'll just go here and import these. I like separating these things. So if you've got custom imports and you've added styles in that file, you can actually just import it here. But if you're using Bootstrap the way I'm using it now, there's absolutely no use, or rather, there are no style sheets, because when you run build, the project will generate a style sheet for you. Because we've imported Bootstrap CSS, it will generate a style sheet for you with Bootstrap copied there, and any other style that you've added, any other styling that you've added, all of it will be. So all of your styling is packed into one file. Instead of importing several files, this is a better approach. So we're importing styles.css. So if just these imports, basically they determine how your files will be, your assets will be built, styles.css. Because this is TypeScript, it's just JavaScript. All of these things we've imported here, they're JavaScript modules and whatever. So we're basically just telling our code that we need to use all of these, so that when it's building, it will build and get all of them so that they're available for our use. So I think I didn't install icons. So just a minute, it's not. So we've got our, I think I'm going to remove this so that we have a better, so it looks a bit better. Let's make the nav bar. Nav bar. Let's make it dark so that it looks better. It's more visible. And then we can have a brand with Avengers, and then the button. The button it's a nav bar. Then an particular icon. Nav bar.
Excuse me, Marco.
Sorry?
Excuse me, just a little bit.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
We are a little
No?
bit, I'm saying that we are a little bit past time.
Yes.
Perhaps we can wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. So well, let's just go. We'll go through how to create our component, and then I think we'll be done. So let's create our team component, and then we'll understand the composition API. So let's create a simple component. This component will have a table, render our users. So it's a simple table, and then it's got it's a simple table with a normal, let's say it's the name of our Avenger, and then got something like that, username. So body. Okay, so yeah, what you're going to do, I love this part because we're using TypeScript and not that. We're going to use the new format. We're going to use define component. So unlike before, unlike Vue 2, if we wanted to abstract more functionality here, and we wanted to create something, Vue 3 changes the way we set up our components. So instead of using data and methods and mounted or whatever, we have a function called setup. This function, basically, it's going to do everything for us. Now, because we defined our Axios instance the other end, we can import it here and use it. Say we can import HTTP from sorry, it says. So this allows us to, you can have this HTTP, because we defined it in one place, we can reuse it anywhere we want. So before, if you're using Vue 2, if you had to define properties that can be reused here, you define them inside data. So in our case, we are not going to be doing that. So here we would say we want this table is going to list Avengers. So we're going to say Avengers is equals to. So this ref, what it does, it makes your variables like reactive. There's another one called reactive, but this one makes your variables reactive. So let's say, so we will define our Avengers and say we expect it to be an array. We expect it to be an array, and then you remember to return you return it. So what we used to do with Vue2, when you define variables inside that data, whatever, here, if anything that is returned by the setup method is available. So we can actually loop through the Avengers here. So now we can also define a method to fetch our Avengers and say, let's call these assemble Avengers. And then what this one does, it will make a HTTP request. Let's say our HTTP request to our API endpoint. And then it will, we can get our data from there, the response. So this is a basic, this is an AXI request. So we are fetching data, and then we're getting it, and then we assign it here, Avengers dot value. So the thing you have to note here is that because what this one does, we've defined on line 19, I've defined these Avengers as a ref. So it is basically an object. So to assign its value, we have to set Avengers value is equals to, or whatever information we've gotten from this response. This again, this is an Axios request. So when we set it like that, forgive me, this is an object. It's not an array because it's coming from our pagination. So what we'll do here to show a list of our users, we can do a normal, we can loop through each of our Avengers and say something like V4. V4, we're doing a simple for loop. So we're going to loop through the data return, and then we can echo out. Don't forget to put the key. Use an ID, the Avengers ID. So basically we can loop through our data and echo it out. So like for the name, we can do name, and then the same. So you notice that here in our case, the setup method simplifies, it simplifies the way we write our code. So it is a lot simpler than having all those other methods we had in the past. Here we can define our own functions. And they can do whatever. Remember to return it if you want to be able to use it there. Then what we use to do mounted hook, instead of using the mounted hook, Vue3 gives us something called onMounted instead. So onMounted, basically, if you want to do something onMounted, let's say in our case, we want to be able to fetch our records when when the component is mounted. So we can write our function like this. What this one does, basically, we're going to be when this is mounted, it will fetch our records. So basically, this function sets our value here, and then the value sets our value for Avengers, and then it's available for our component to use this side. So I think this is one of the main bits about Vue 3. I know here we defined a very simple thing, the service Vue 3, but there are a lot more. There's a lot more you can do with that. You can define more complex modules and import them the way we've imported our HTTP module, and then you can use it as you want. So if you'll allow me, I can create one module for users, and then we can close.
Yeah, sure. Just go ahead.
That's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So let's say we wanted to abstract this functionality for users. Like if you're creating an Avenger or deleting them or updating them. Let's create a service for users. So this is called we call them composable functions. So what they do in our case, like here we want like to group all user functionalities together. So we can import our HTTP. It's in the same directory. HTTP from. Okay. So here we want to group all our user functionalities into one file. So we can create a simple function and export it, like export default function user. So let's call it. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it user service. And then inside this function, our function, we're going to define everything on. Let's say we have we want a list of Avengers, or rather, yeah, a list of Avengers. It's sorry. So here, what this allows you to import any module you have. So if you've imported, let's say if you've imported, you can use any module you've installed. So in this case, let's say we want to use a few things from Vue. So Vue has a few helper functions like ref, like reactive, like computed. So instead of using hooks in the component, we can do it this way. So here we can define other functions inside here and say say you want one fetch. You want a method that fetches all users. So this one, our method can do what we did here. So basically, we can get this function. We can remove these two and bring them here and bring them in this in our composable function here. And then what we're doing, basically, so our method, what our method does, it fetches our records. It fetches our records from the API and then sets them. So you need to remember this, that when you're creating these composable functions, you have to return everything, otherwise it won't be available. So and our method assemble. So what this one does, by returning them, we're availing them to any component that might use them. So here in our team of having those functions here, we can import our service. We've created that composable service for users. So we'll import it in our component. We can import it, let's say, import user service from services users. So this is when you can have as many composable functions as you want. Then you can import them in any component you want. So here we'll be able, we are able to, because we defined these two, already in our composable function, we can set them here and say is equals to user service. So what we're doing here basically, when we call this our composable function, it avails these two for us. They become available, and then here we can return them. So this one, it makes your code very clean. There's less. You remember with Vue 2, you would have to do created hook, then mounted hook, and then and then the others. So this with Vue 3, it simplifies our work. We can define whatever, we can abstract almost any functionality we need, and then we can simply import them and use them as we need. So here in the user service, you can add another method for creating a user that makes a post request. You can add another function that deletes a user. You can add another function that fetches a single user. Then you can return all of them, and you can access them in any component whatsoever. So instead of rewriting the code over and over again, you can just import your module, your composable function here, like we did in the team. You can just import it and use it as you wish. So I know we don't have time, but I think, I don't know if anyone has any questions we can clear. There's a lot more, of course. There's a lot more we could. Sorry? Someone was talking. Did I hear someone talking?
Anyone with a question? We can take two questions. You can also post it in the chat section.
Yeah. Anyone got any question? So we can finish.
Yes, Mr. Mauko.
Yes.
Can you hear me clearly? So I have one question about hosting. Can you briefly talk about hosting Vue apps?
Hosting Vue apps?
Yes.
when you build your Vue app, it is when you build it, when you type and build, it is going to generate static code for you. It generates a folder called dist, and in that folder, you're going to have, I know if I build now, it will take forever. But when you build, when you type and build or npm build, when you build it, it creates a folder called dist. That dist folder, it has all your assets. It has a file called index.html, and then all the assets that have been compiled. So you can actually just copy those files and put them on your server, any server. If it's cPanel, if you're using cPanel, you can upload those files inside your public directory, and they'll be served, because in your server will be looking for an index file, and it will load the index.html file. So you can use it, you can use that on any server. The only challenge with deploying on the server is that there's the navigation breaks. Like someone can't, if they navigate directly to, if you share a link with them and they navigate to it directly, it might cause issues. So what we do, the workaround, I'm going to upload, this is available on GitHub, you can view it, but here, what you do, because the index.html file is basically what routes everything, we are supposed to add these. I'm trying to look this last. No, not that. Let me see if I can find a different. Basically, you can do that. You can have it on your server. You just copy the file, all the files inside the folder, the dist folder, and upload them into your public document root for whatever, if it's a subdomain or a main domain, and then it will be served from there, because it's index.html with all the other So any other question as I load this? Sorry, I'm trying to get basically when you deploy your app and it gives you those issues, and when someone navigates to a page and it gives them a not found or something, the workaround is you do this. You're supposed to define one route that is a catch-all. Basically, what this one does, it basically returns anything to the index.html file. So here, we're doing a reject for anything that is not defined. So if this one, because it's loading a component and the component will be loaded through the index.html file, then the index.html file will load the correct route. So this is how it's a catch-all route. You're supposed to add it so that it catches anything that might fail and directs it back to the index.html file. So if you're when you're deploying it to a server, this route is necessary. It would help with the routes that whatever issues might arise. Any other question?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I wanted to give someone a chance, but since there's no one asking a question, can you talk more on? I saw you you skipped Vue.x, something like that. During initialization.
Is
Why
that
do you choose
with Vue3? Sorry? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Why do you decide not to use the Vuex in your projects?
Well, Vuex is used for state management, yeah? And state management is basically you want to maintain data like across your components. But if you look at the composition API, like in this case, if we had a module, you see this user service, let's say one of the methods for the user service fetches the currently logged in user. And you want to show the user's data on every component. So if you are importing this module in your components, then you'll have access to that information. So it removes the need for another state management system, because these modules are global, basically, because they're global functions. You can use them anywhere. The way they've been defined, they're global. You can use them anywhere. So that data is persisted across whatever. Of course, Vuex can still be used. There's a project that I'm actually using Vuex, but at some point it's going to become redundant. You won't need it. So if you're just managing state like this, like say if you had logged in a user and we saved the information in local storage, and the user service had a method for fetching that user, and that method checks the local storage, then we can use that method across all the other components. We don't need Vuex for that. So that's why for Vue3, you don't really need Vuex. You can still use it, but it seems to be an overkill. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was quite good.
But you can still use it if you want. Like I have, it's here, but I haven't used it. It's here, so you can actually still use it. It's not it's a bad practice or whatever. You can still use it, but the composition API kind of renders that it's pointless in a way.
Okay, thank you. The reason I asked that is because I come from a React background, and they tried to introduce state management via the main React API. And I find that at big projects, you are forced just to go back to Redux. And I think, I don't know the case for Vue, whether there are some projects you'll be forced to use Vuex instead of the composition API. But I think time will tell, because it has not stayed for long, the composition API.
Yeah, it's still fresh. But Vue, if you install Vue and use Vue Next, the 4.0 Cornelia, it has support for Vue3, and it has support for the composition API. So you can actually still use Vuex with these, but you just like use the Next. You have to type, if you're installing it, and add Vuex at Next, because it hasn't been released yet. It's still in development. So you could try use that.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Maoko. I know you haven't exhausted much of your session. Perhaps we can still have you this coming week, so that you can clear up your session. I don't know what you think about that.
I'm okay with that. If you guys still you'd want to go further, I'm okay with that. We can explore the rest of the features and a few other things I'd learned.
All right. Yeah, thanks. That was a very informative session. We'll plan for next week. I'll inform you by tomorrow about that. Yes, I don't know. Anyone with any suggestion about today's session? I'm posting a feedback form to the chat section so that you can be able to fill it when you get time. It's only 2 questions. What you think about the session, what we should improve in the next session. We're looking forward to have Moko, and also Moko, I think we will you don't have access to our GitHub account.
Sorry?
Our GitHub account.
No, I don't have access, but I've shared the repo for this project.
Okay. I'll also fork it in our Vue.js group so that others can access it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the session.
Okay, I've texted the link in the chat here, but I'll share it in the group as well, so that everyone has access to it or whatever.
All right. Thanks again. Please just make sure you fill the feedback form.